All right, let's dive into Suzhou, China today. We're going to be using some excerpts from FlightNHotels.com and this little snippet called Discover the Beauty of Suzhou.
Sounds good.
Think of this as like your little cheat sheet to Suzhou.
Yeah.
We're talking history, we're talking attractions, and of course, we got to talk about the food.
Always got to talk about the food.
You know, Suzhou, what's interesting to me is it's not just some ancient city frozen in time, right?
Right.
It's got this crazy long history. We're talking over 2,500 years.
That's a long time.
But it's also like a modern, like thriving place.
Exactly. And that's what's so fascinating about Suzhou. It's not just, like you said, frozen in time. It has this incredible history, but it's also very much a modern hub. That blend of old and new, that's what makes it so unique.
Okay, so we hear Suzhou called the Venice of the East all the time, but is it really like Venice?
Well, let's talk about those canals.
Yeah, what's the deal with the canals?
They're not just there for the tourists. They were Suzhou's lifeline for centuries.
Really?
Oh, yeah, they were the transportation network, the trade routes, like it was everything. Imagine strolling down Pingjiang Road, and this is like a historic street lined with tea houses and shops.
Sounds charming.
Oh, it is. And you've got these canals just flowing right alongside you. It's like you're stepping back in time, but you're also in the present day.
I can picture it now. The source also mentions Zhouzhuang water town, called the No One water town in China.
Oh, yeah, Zhouzhuang.
Arched bridges, ancient buildings, waterways. I bet a boat ride there would be amazing.
Absolutely. And don't forget about the Grand Canal,
Oh, right, the Grand Canal.
the one that connects Suzhou to other parts of China. It was a major player in shaping the city. Think of it as like a superhighway for trade.
Bringing in all sorts of things.
Goods, ideas, you name it. And that's why Suzhou has this awesome blend of influences, a real melting pot.
Okay, let's be real. Most people think Suzhou, they think gardens.
Right, the garden.
These aren't just any gardens. We're talking UNESCO World Heritage Sites.
Exactly, and for good reason.
Yeah.
They are masterpieces,
Yeah.
seriously.
Yeah.
Each one has its own unique personality, you know.
Oh, interesting.
Like take the humble administrator's garden. It's not just the biggest garden in Suzhou, which it is.
Okay.
It's designed to feel like you're journeying through different landscapes, like a little mini version of nature right there within the walls.
Well, peaceful.
You've got serene ponds, pavilions, tons of greenery. It's an escape from the city.
I like it. Now, the source mentions two other gardens, the Lingering Garden and the Master of the Nets Garden. What makes those stand out?
Well, the Lingering Garden is known for its, you could say, whimsical elements. You'll see rock formations, water features, even have poetic inscriptions all over the place.
Oh, wow.
It's a real treat for the eyes and the mind, for sure. And then you have the Master of the Nets Garden. It's smaller, but it's all about elegance, like refined elegance. Everything there is so harmonious. The carvings, the courtyards,
Sounds tranquil.
very tranquil.
I love that each garden offers something a little different. And hey, pro tip from the source, visit the gardens early to beat the crowds.
Always a good tip.
Yeah.
Nobody likes massive tourist groups.
Nope. But Suzhou's not all gardens, right? There's got to be more.
Oh, there's plenty more. If you're a history buff, check out Tiger Hill. It's got this natural beauty, and get this, it's home to the Union Pagoda. It's sometimes called the Leaning Tower of China.
No way, a leaning tower in Suzhou.
Yep, right there.
Okay, I'm adding that to my list. The source also mentioned the Suzhou Silk Museum.
Ah, yes, silk.
I'm already picturing myself surrounded by beautiful silk scarves, learning about the city's silk-making history.
Well, Suzhou has been a silk powerhouse for ages.
Yeah.
At the Silk Museum, you can learn the whole process, from raising silkworms to weaving.
That's so cool. You might even see those artisans at work.
Exactly. It's really something.
And I gotta mention the Suzhou Museum. It was designed by the one and only I.M. Pei.
A legend.
What I find so cool is how he blended those traditional Chinese elements with, like, modern architecture.
You nailed it. It's
Yeah.
like Suzhou itself, the perfect blend of old and new.
And inside, you've got artifacts, calligraphy, paintings. It's like a history and art extravaganza.
It really is. And speaking of blends, we can't forget about Suzhou's other specialty. It's delicious food.
It's crazy how Suzhou isn't just, a bunch of tourist spots. It's like a real-life storybook.
It really is. The history, the culture, it's all right there.
Like you can feel it woven into the streets and canals and everything.
You got it. And speaking of the canals, we were talking about those earlier.
Yeah.
They're more than just waterways. They're like symbols,
Symbols of what?
of the flow of time, the ebb and flow of life in Suzhou.
I like that.
Think back to the Grand Canal and its role as like a trade route. It wasn't just goods being transported, it was ideas,
Yep.
customs, culinary influences, even from all over China.
Oh, that's why Suzhou feels so different. It's like this tapestry woven together over centuries.
Exactly.
Makes me think about that boat ride we were talking about.
Yeah, the boat ride.
It wouldn't just be sightseeing, would it?
No.
It'd be like floating through the story of Suzhou.
You got it. Imagine gliding past those traditional wooden boats, under the bridges, with the willow trees hanging over the banks. It's a whole experience, the water, the sights, the sounds, even the smells of the city.
Okay, you've convinced me boat ride is a must-do.
Definitely must do.
But let's get back to the gardens. Our source called them masterpieces of landscape architecture, and you were saying how each one has its own personality. Tell me more about that.
Okay, so let's take the humble administrator's garden.
Okay.
It's massive, that's one thing,
Yeah, you said it's the biggest.
but it's the design that's really impressive. It's not just a random collection of plants and buildings. It's meant to evoke a sense of journey, like you're going through different landscapes within the garden itself.
Oh, I see.
One minute you might be looking at a peaceful pond, the next you're in a bamboo grove, stumbling upon a hidden pavilion.
That sounds like a good place to just get lost in thought. Find some peace and quiet. What about the lingering garden? What's its personality?
The lingering garden's a little more playful, almost mischievous, I'd say.
Devious, huh?
Yeah, like the rock formations. They're not just there to look pretty. They're arranged to create a sense of wonder, surprise, even amusement.
I like it.
And they have these poetic inscriptions all over the place.
Oh, yeah, you mentioned those before.
They add another dimension to the garden, you know. They make you think about the beauty of nature and the art of words.
Playful and mischievous. I love that. Makes me want to explore every corner.
You definitely should.
And then there's the Master of the Nets garden. You said it was all about elegance and harmony.
Exactly. The Master of the Nets garden is proof that less is more. It's not as big as the other two gardens, but its beauty is in its simplicity. Everything is intentional. The bonsai trees, the carved window lattices, it all creates a sense of balance.
Sounds like a haven of tranquility. You know, I always thought these gardens were like private retreats for rich families. But our source said that a lot of them were actually designed to be enjoyed by people from all walks of life.
That's right. While some were privately owned, many were made as public spaces.
Really?
Yep. Places where people could connect with nature, find inspiration, you know, just get away from everyday life.
I didn't realize that. That's amazing. It really adds another layer of appreciation to these gardens, knowing they were meant for everyone. Okay, enough about gardens. Time to talk about another one of Suzhou's delights.
You mean the food,
Yes, the food. We already touched on the squirrel-shaped fish,
right? The squirrelfish.
but what other culinary treasures are we in for?
Oh, Suzhou cuisine is a delight, seriously. And we've got to talk about noodles.
Okay, noodles. I'm listening.
Suzhou is a noodle paradise. They're known for their subtle flavors, their springy texture. It's an art.
Any particular types you recommend?
Well, you can't go wrong with Yangchun noodles. That's a classic. But if you want something a little more filling, try Aozaomian.
Aozaomian.
They're these hand-pulled noodles served in a rich, savory broth. So good.
Okay, those are going on my list. What about dumplings? Are those a thing in Suzhou?
Dumplings are definitely a thing.
All right, good.
You have to try Suzhou-style dumplings. They're usually filled with pork, shrimp, and veggies, and then steamed to perfection.
I'm already getting hungry. It sounds like a trip to Suzhou requires an appetite.
Uh-huh. That's for sure.
And we haven't even talked about dessert. We mentioned those mooncakes before.
The mooncakes.
What other sweet treats should we be looking for?
Well, if you want something light, try the dingsheng cake.
Dingsheng cake.
It's this fluffy, steamed cake,
Mm-hmm.
light, airy, just melts in your mouth.
Sounds perfect.
It's a Suzhou classic.
Okay, dingsheng cake added to the list. So we've covered the gardens, the canals, the history, the food. Is there anything else we absolutely cannot miss in Suzhou?
That's a good question. Let me think. Well, if you want to see those ancient silk-making traditions in action, you could visit a silk factory or an embroidery workshop.
That's a great idea.
It's amazing to see those artisans work. Their skill is incredible.
It's one thing to admire the final product, but to actually witness the process, that would be something else. What about performances? Our source mentioned Suzhou Opera.
Yes, the opera. It's a spectacle, for sure. Famous for its costumes, the makeup, the singing.
Okay, Suzhou Opera added to the list.
It's an immersive experience, really.
Sounds like a perfect way to experience Suzhou's artistic side. And speaking of planning a trip, we can't forget about FlightNHotels.com. They're a great resource for finding good deals on flights and places to stay.
Oh, yeah, they seem to have it all. You can compare prices from different airlines, different hotels, so you can find what works for you.
A one-stop shop for travel needs. So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, what are the main things our listeners should take away? What makes Suzhou so special?
Well, Suzhou is a city that really does blend the old and the new. It's a place where you can experience history and culture firsthand. And it's beautiful. There's a real sense of peace and tranquility there, especially in the gardens.
It's the perfect mix of history, culture, nature, and of course the food. And with FlightNHotels.com, planning a trip is easy. But before we get to our final thoughts on Suzhou, let's take a minute to think about what we've learned so far.
You know, as we've been talking about Suzhou, one thing that's really stood out to me is just how well they blend the old and the new.
Yeah, it's not just like a superficial thing either. It's
Right.
like it's a part of their culture.
Absolutely. And that actually brings us back to something we talked about before, the silk industry.
Oh yeah, the silk.
It's not just a historical thing. It's still very much alive in Suzhou.
That's right. It's a big part of their identity.
For centuries, their silk has been like world-renowned.
It's true.
It's amazing. It really speaks to the skill of those silk makers.
Our source mentioned the Suzhou Silk Museum.
Yeah.
It sounds like a must visit for anyone who wants to really understand that whole industry.
Absolutely. If you want to dive deep into the world of silk, that's the place to go.
I can imagine.
You can learn about the entire process,
Wow.
from raising the silkworms to the weaving techniques they use to create those incredible fabrics.
That's pretty cool.
And you might even get to see the artisans at work.
Oh, wow.
It's mesmerizing to watch.
Yeah, it's one thing to see a silk scarf in a store,
Right.
but to actually see how it's made, to understand the history, the artistry behind it,
Yeah,
it gives you a whole new appreciation for it.
it really does.
And we can't forget about the silk markets.
Well, the markets,
I can only imagine the colors, the textures.
it's a sensory overload.
Yeah.
You can find everything there, from traditional clothing to modern designs, home decor.
Oh, wow.
It's the perfect place to find a souvenir.
Okay. Silk markets added to the itinerary.
Definitely.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Suzhou, what stands out to you the most? What makes it so special?
That's a tough one.
There's so much.
There is so much to love about Suzhou, the history, the culture, the beauty. But I think what really sets it apart is that ability to embrace both the past and the future.
Yes.
It's proof that progress and tradition can not only coexist, but thrive together.
Yeah, that's a great point.
It's a city that's constantly evolving while still honoring its roots.
I think that's why so many travelers are drawn to Suzhou.
Yeah,
It offers this glimpse into China's rich heritage, but it's also very modern and vibrant.
exactly. It's timeless and timely all at once.
It really is. Suzhou is a place where you can wander through ancient gardens, but also see incredible modern architecture.
Right.
You can try traditional food, but also experience the energy of a really thriving city all in one day.
It's a unique blend that you won't find everywhere.
Well said. So as we say farewell to Suzhou, let's leave our listeners with a question to think about.
Okay.
Suzhou shows us that it is possible for a city to blend the old and the new seamlessly. What other ancient cities around the world are doing the same thing? What other destinations offer that kind of journey through time?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
Something for our listeners to explore on their own.
And maybe it'll inspire them to do their own deep dives into some of those fascinating cities all over the world.
I hope so.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.